Now I'd like to introduce Greta Edwards, who I think probably better known as Professor Peabody. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Well,
Greta Tomlinson.
We all read about her, and we'd like to hear from the originator where it all happened. Thank you very much.
Well, if anyone would like, I really would like to say a huge thank you for asking me today to help celebrate the Eagle magazine. I feel greatly honoured that that I'm here today. It feels as if life has come full circle somehow. So if anyone would care to ask any questions about the original studio, I should also say a big thank you on behalf of the original Southport studio, the members of which are no longer with us, I'm afraid. So I first joined in February 1950, and it came out in April the 14th. I saw the job advertised. I'd just graduated from the Slade School, and had tramped around looking for work with advertising agencies, and there was absolutely nothing. So I saw a minute advert, about 2 lines, in the Advertiser's Weekly, which was a media magazine, which said strip cartoon artists wanted, which actually was a bit suspect in those days. I thought I might apply and say that, as I come from the north of England anyway, that I was travelling home and could I come for an interview. So they said, Frank wrote, "Dear Madam," back. "Dear Madam," I still got the letter. "We were delighted to see you on such a day." Frank's first page was on his board, the front page of the Eagle, the first page, and I just fell in love with it. I had to have the job. I just was so taken with the front page, the format, the drawing, everything. And Pop Hampson, Frank's father, rang and offered me the job at £4.10 a week, and I jumped at it. So that's how I came to be working in Southport in the bakery, and all the team, we all got on extremely well, and I've enjoyed every second of it. I'd just like to actually correct a former speaker who said that Frank Hampson drew the back page, the religious bit, but a huge amount was taken over, if not most of it, by Jocelyn Thomas, who never seems to get a mention. And she was a member of the team and never touched Dandare, but she was working on the back page. We eventually did quite a bit of Tommy Walls, for which I got another £2 a week. Eventually, unfortunately, we had Rob Conway dumped on us. Harold and I hadn't a clue about script writing. The story wasn't there. It was a disaster, really. And then we struggled along with it, inventing things from week to week. For some unknown reason, we put it in Tibet, I think. God knows why, because we knew nothing about Tibet. And we just drew lots of mountains. And we couldn't continue, we couldn't find a story, we couldn't end it, we didn't know how to end it, so we dumped it on somebody else. And the drawing of the end is pretty poor. But I have some originals here of, I think mostly they are marooned on Mercury, which Harold Johns and I took over when Frank became ill at some point. I had to buy these back at Christie's. I have one of Frank Hampson's, but it's framed, so I couldn't bring it. But I must say it was absolutely a fascinating part of my life. Enjoyed every second of it, even working all night and all day, and I mean all night and all day. Even catching the same bus at 8 o'clock in the morning. Work was going to work, we were going back for breakfast to our digs or wherever, and then we'd come back and work again. And I remember David Britton asking, had I got any diaries? And I said, I'll have a look. So I had a look, and every page was working till 3 a.m., working till 5 a.m., worked all night, and one that made me laugh, which said, worked till 3 a.m., Frank gave me the rest of the day off. But it was great stuff, and very inventive. Frank must have been a genius, because in actual fact he has forecast that we would run out of food and had to go to another planet, and it wouldn't surprise me if that didn't happen. And also, I believe in his helmet was something that translated the Treen language or the Theron language, and I've seen that on television since, of people holding out their iPod or whatever they call it, with a translation. Absolutely wonderful. Frank asked me to design Dander's flat, which terrified me, but since the age of 15 I'd been in the library and seen that you could be an interior decorator. I didn't know it existed, the job. And I had a lot of magazines that I had got from America, even during the war, of interior decorating. So I immediately looked at those and came up with something which, when I look at it today, was absolutely 1950s. So it was supposed to look like the year 2000. But it certainly was the biggest learning curve, and taught me an enormous discipline, which I've managed to carry out for the rest of my life. I then, after leaving, I was there about 4.5 years. I went into fashion drawing and commercial television, and then eventually I married in 56. I married in Baghdad and went to live in the Middle East for quite a long time. And then I continued painting, and still would be painting today if I could see properly. And I belong a sort of collection or photocopies of paintings that I've done since leaving the Eagle. But it's been an interesting life.
She's answered what I was going to say.
Right, okay. Now, thank you very much. That was a fascinating insight. I'm sure there are some questions. If I could ask one first. Who invented the actual words like crumph and woomph? Because that's what I learned.
I think it must have been Frank, and I remember showing my 2-year-old grandson here some of the annuals which Frank and Harold and I took over, and he would say, "What's that say? What's that say?" And it was crumph and woomph and wow.
Yes, just the words I learnt as well. Now, I'm sure there are other questions. There's one straight away there.
I'm curious, when you have a team of artists basically working, how I work on my own as an artist, and I can't imagine having someone else muscling into my space. And I was wondering how it sort of broke down in those days. I mean, we all know you to be one of the artists, but it's very hard for me to, like, if you could pull out some area that you particularly specialised in. You mentioned the flat, etc., but I'm never entirely sure who drew what bit and how you actually approached that professionally at the time.
Well, I was a figure artist.
Right, yes.
And I had nothing to do with the technical bit. So Frank would do the roughs, which were superb and really needn't have been touched at all. So there was an awful time lag there, a waste of time, because his roughs could have been used straight away.
Yes.
But he was a perfectionist, and he would then ask for people to pose, and we would take photographs, and then I would be given the photograph and his rough. Then I would redo or hand it to somebody who would then do the background, which would be technical.
Yes.
It would be handed to Bruce Cornwall or Eric Eden, and sometimes Harold and I worked together. The head of Dandare was quite difficult, especially three-quarter back view I found. So I would slip it over to Harold to do the head.
All right. I was wondering if there was a specific Greta Tomlinson take on Dan. One's familiar with the Hampson original, and then the late Bellamy's and Keith Watson's take and Don Harley's. They all vary a little bit. And I'm wondering if there's any way you could show us or point to us a definitive Greta Dandare.
Well, some here.
What about this one with the heads on?
This is one, which was all the figures on there, not that head.
Yeah, give me that.
Yes, all the figures on there. Yes, and the figures on there.
Yes. Is that your Dandare?
What?
Is that your Dandare?
I don't think so.
Do you want a microphone?
There's one.
Is it any of you?
Right, thank you. Any more questions? There's one in behind here. John's going to ask something intelligent. Right.
No, this is not this is not intelligent at all. This is a sort of bit of fan trivia, really. Who invented Dandar's?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry, a bit of fan trivia, really. Who invented Dandare's squiggly eyebrow?
Frank Hampson. Yes, that was.
Signature eyebrows.
Yes, absolutely.
I have to warn you that this microphone is not for a loudspeaker system. It's purely to record it on the TV, because on the video, because otherwise we don't hear the questions, we only hear the answers. Right, any more questions? Yes?
Thank you. So far as I know, Professor Peabody was the first really strong...
Could you repeat that?
sorry, I'll stand up perhaps.
Yes.
Okay. So far as I know, Professor Peabody was the first really strong female scientist character to appear in any strip cartoon. Was it Frank Hampson himself who just invented the character, or was he perhaps inspired to have a character like Professor Peabody because you yourself, who became the model, was actually working in the studio?
I sometimes wonder when I went to apply for the job if Frank didn't decide, maybe it would be fine for Professor Peabody. I hope I got it on the strength of my life drawings and my work. I understand from Rob Barsley that 20% of the readers were girls, and I do like to think that I might have inspired girls to go forward and take part in different studies. What I found extraordinary once, when a student rang me, she was doing a project, and she said, "What sort of antagonism did you get?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, in 1950, what sort of antagonism did you get from the men artists?" I said, "I don't know what you're talking about. It never occurred to me. There wasn't any at all." And it amazed me that she should think that way, because it didn't happen. We were accepted. I mean, there was Jocelyn Thomas, Joan Porter, and myself. We just fitted in. It's great.
The team, yes.
Any other questions? Yes, there we go.
You described Frank Hampson as being a perfectionist. Was there anything person assigned to be a sort of continuity girl to make things the same over a period of time?
I'm sorry, you said about Frank. Could you?
Was there any continuity person that actually made sure the stories all hung together?
No, there wasn't. It seemed to go. It's amazing, really, when you think about it, because as has already been mentioned, that Frank would go home. He never asked anybody to do anything he wouldn't do himself. He would go home, work all night, as we were working all night in a different place, and he would come in and say, "Got this fantastic idea, forget it." And you would just take your work and put it in the bin, and we'd start again. And he really... I remember drawing or painting, I think it was down there water skiing, and he said, "I want it done again." So I did it again, and he said, "I want it done again." So I did it again, fuming, of course, and I think he stuck a speech balloon over it. But,
Right, one last question, then it's lunchtime, but I'm hoping that we can actually have these laid out here for people to look at during lunch. That would be great. Right, any last question? I'm sure we can ask them over lunch, because lunch is going to be a buffet in there. But thank you very much, that was excellent, and we'll be asking more questions in a moment.